All right, welcome to the RatCast episode one. I'm Icy with Icyfire Gaming, and so this is going to be a ESO PvP podcast where we pretty much talk about anything PvP related, and whether pertain to the patch notes, theory crafting about sets or mythics, whatever it is. And if anybody has any questions that they'd like us to investigate or talk about on the show, just type it in the comments below. And there will be an audio version of the podcast if you're interested in that. It'll probably be on Anchor, and I'll make sure to put a link in that or to that. I'll make sure to put a link to Anchor down in the description below once that's available. And yeah, so let's jump into it. So, and one more thing, it is going to be a 3-person, 4-person show, and so our recurring guests are going to be Candlestick Maker. How you doing, Candle?
Greetings.
And our second is Shoddy Magician. How you doing, Shoddy?
Hello there.
And our fourth is going to be Camera, but he'll probably be here next week. And, it'll be a 3-4. We rotate him out, whatever it is, whoever is available, that type of thing. And in terms of like frequency, weekly, every other week, who knows? We'll see how it goes. So with that, so let's jump into the show finally. Cyrodiil performance. They upgraded the servers several weeks ago, and since the podcast is starting now, I figured let's just get some of our thoughts on it. I know me personally, I've been loving the Cyrodiil gameplay. I've never really gone in there prior. I have occasionally back in the past, but it's always been, my biggest gripe was always how do people stand playing in here when you can't even cast abilities and stuff? But now you can for the most part, and it's been pretty good. And Shoddy, with you, because I recently joined the Legends Syndicate, your guilds, and running with you guys in Greyhouse and stuff, and that's been a blast. How have what do you think of overall with the performance and stuff?
Yeah, so I wasn't much of a Cyrodiil player either for a long time because it would just lag. Ability input would last for several seconds. Bar swaps would fail. Break free would fail. It was a mess. Like you just literally couldn't play the game. But when they did the server upgrade, ironically, they said it wouldn't fix anything, but it actually made a massive difference. So much so that people have decided that they'd rather play Cyrodiil than do BGs, something that a lot of people in this guild
Yeah.
do. It was such a massive change and something new for everybody that everybody just wanted to do Cyrodiil, and they still do. It's been great.
There's an
Um,
interesting thing that happens to like with the lag, which is when there's too much lag, as there used to be, it literally prevents you from having a skilled rotation, prevents you from having a knowledgeable combo for attacking people because it throws off your timing and things don't work. And it actually encourages people to just have a build that's designed for lag. And now with no lag or reduced lag, it's really encouraging good PvPers, people who have planned out their builds and designed their builds and theory crafted well. It's really encouraging them to get in there and enjoy it.
Do you think?
yeah,
Do you think? Because I think Fang Rush is making a comeback, sort of, and I just saw Christopher ESO, run around Blackreach yesterday. Do you think? I guess I don't want to be jumping the
I
gun
would
too much, but with the resurgence in Cyrodiil, what do you think they're going to increase capacity or things like that? With because I know queue times and stuff are insane. Like I've seen like 45-minute, 50-minute queues. Once it gets to like 8 p.m. Eastern time, almost on the daily.
I think that that is possible. In fact, they may have already done that because, as you know, there have been people talking about the potential of the lag coming back somewhat. Not to the same level it was before, but people have started talking about they feel a little bit of lag here and there now that it's been a few weeks. And I don't think that servers have degraded that quickly, and I don't think that they've reduced the power of the servers. That would be pretty ridiculous to do that. So my suspicion is that perhaps they actually have already done that, and we're starting
Mm.
to feel that higher population overall, because there's no way to us to see it, right? We don't have a number to say, 700 out of 1,000 players in this campaign, right? We just have the 3 bars, but that doesn't
Right.
actually give us a detailed explanation of what's actually in there.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what they're planning on doing. I don't pay attention to a lot of the stuff that they're saying on the forums, in all honesty. I just enjoy the game, I theory craft with the players, and hope for the best.
Since you mentioned, Shadi, since you did mention it about the, we can't see the numbers. Do you think is that something that we should be allowed to do? Because I've heard this once where maybe it was back with New World, but if as like the customer, the users, us, if we have the ability to actually see the actual population numbers, then it kind of you're kind of like dooming yourself, because then once you see like a slight degradation, over like maybe like a period of time, whether it be a couple of weeks, whatever, you can kind of like, oh, we're not getting as much people because we can actually see the actual number. So then, you start to think, oh, well, maybe the game's dying or something like that, right? So then it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy where by allowing us to see it, we're just, eventually going to trick ourselves into thinking that nobody's playing.
I think that's a legitimate concern, but I also think there's a great deal of value to be had in having actual numbers and not just these, vaguely determining bars that we currently have. Because if you can see the numbers, you can actually just get a better idea of what's going on. So I'm going to actually step away from Cyrodiil for a second and talk more in line of BGs and Imperial City, because a lot of times people want to play Imperial City or they want to play BGs, but you have no idea how many people is actually doing that too. And sometimes you end up just wasting your time on a queue or roaming around in Imperial City looking for a fight when there is none to be had. And that sounds like a bad thing overall, but it can actually mean that people can move over to stuff where there is actually things going on and just save people time. So like if I see 200 people in solo queue and there's only like 30 in group queue, then maybe I don't even bother with group queue in BGs and I just go the solo queue where people are actually at. I think this would be useful too in Cyrodiil, just maybe not something that I could immediately point out like I can with the other 2 instances of PvP. But I think that has value in of itself.
Yeah, instead of just leaving people waiting in group queue, they're just sitting around waiting. There's been so many times that we've had groups of people in Battleground group queue. They literally, like at this point, all of us know, okay, you set up a group, you get a group going, and then you just go hang out in Cyrodiil or IC while you've got that group queue ticking, waiting, and you have no idea if it's ever going to pop and you're ever actually going to get in or not.
Do you think they should, or I think maybe it's an easy question, but you think they should kind of revamp how they do the queue system? Because one of the implementations that I like is kind of how they do it in Smite, where almost no matter what, every I think like minute or 2 minutes, the queue will pop, and then it's just kind of where you stand in that line in terms of when you're going to be matchmade or not. So I'm not sure in terms of your what your MMR is in Smite, in relation to how their queue system works. But I think that system's pretty good because you're never gonna. I've only ever queued for arena, so I'm an arena scrub, I guess, or whatever, an arena rat, right? But if I can't ever say that I've ever waited 15, 20 minutes. No, it'll never be the case. It's always been, oh, okay, I didn't get in this round. I'm going to get a guaranteed in the next, 2 minute queue pop, right? So to me, that seems like an ideal system. But, what do you guys think?
So my opinion on the queue system for BGs, which long story short is horrible, but there's a lot of flaws to it. First off, it's an MMR system versus an ELO system. ELO is more like your score can go up and down, and it's based off your, wins and losses and how you've played overall. The MMR system that ZOS employs is actually a very basic system. It's kind of lazy, actually. It solely goes off of how many games you've won, or just games that you've played, even not even won. Like, you still get MMR for losing. It's just that you get a little less because you lost.
Okay, so it's
But
kind of like always going up, sort of.
yes, it always goes up. Eventually, there's a cap, I assume, where you just kind of set in that like top range. But it's really just like separating the people who play a lot and the people who don't play a lot. But again, you end up in a very high MMR, and so what happens is you're just setting there and setting there and setting there and waiting for people to either end a game or come into the queue that has a similar MMR as you. Now, there is another system that I think exists, and it's where the MMR will very slowly degrade down, not permanently, but for that specific game while it's looking for a game, it will slowly degrade down and match you with lower MMR people. But this is a very long process, and I'm not actually sure if that fully exists, but I think it does. They don't explain this stuff, so some of this is speculative, some of this is facts. That second part is speculative. The first part is fact. But it's the only explanation I really have for some of the stuff that goes on with the queue system. But it's extremely flawed. At this point, they should just completely remove it, or they should remake it and make it more of an ELO system where your score goes down when you lose games and it goes up when you win games.
Kind of like how League of Legends does it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or, in fact, most competitive games in general.
There are so many examples that we have. There's so many examples of competitive PvP games or just casual PvP games with queue systems that are good and queue systems that work. And despite how easy it is for us to criticize the game that we are all loving and playing in ESO, there is still something special about ESO. There's something there that keeps us coming back. There's something that keeps us addicted to the PvP because there is something special about it. And it's easy to criticize and say what can be better. And I don't know what it is. I've heard rumors that perhaps the PvP community is not listened to enough, and that might be true. I try to give them credit and say that there is something special here, and I try not to be too critical. Hopefully, things will get better.
Yeah, I mean, especially with the server upgrade, that's kind of,
Yes.
a unintentionally improved performance. I think there's definitely hope for sure. So, what was gonna? Oh, so in terms of for the BGQs, right? I've always had the thought where, we have all these whenever a new game comes out, and my thought is always, we have all these existing systems in place, right? Whether you see it in, I'm going to take, I've been playing Gears of War 5 a lot lately, so I'll just use that as an example. They have active reloading, okay? So, of course, you hit your reload button, and it will, the normal default reload, say, takes like 4 seconds, right? But they have a little, white bar, with a gray like after image of the bar as well, right? For like the general active reload. But then if you get it spot on in the white section, then you're gonna get like a triple bonus or something. It's a lot smaller, but and your gun will reload instantly for the most part. That's such a wonderful system, right? And it keeps me engaged when I'm in a firefight. Why don't I see those active reload type systems in all these types of games, right? That have a like reloading type mechanic, and especially with, I'll take New World for fishing, right? New World's fishing, I think, is fantastic with how they implemented it. It's very active, not passive. To me, ESO's version of fishing is very lackluster when you compare it to New World. But you have between Gears of War 5 and New World, those are two systems in place where if there was some other game that was going to implement a similar system, it should automatically have that system because it actually works and it's good. Now, let me actually tie it back to the BG thing. In terms of like implementing MMR, right, or ELO, matchmaking, whatever you want to call it, we have all these other competitive type games that have it implemented correctly. I guess for the most part, I'll just say, I don't want to say, is it too hard to believe that, ZOS isn't able to do that? Because it's not even like, ESO is an MMO, and I guess League of Legends would be like a MOBA or something like, I guess a massive multiplayer online battle arena or something like that. They're different genres, but they wouldn't be competitors. But what's stopping a ZOS developer from just like, hey, knocking on the door of Riot Games, like, hey, can you just kind of, might we have like a little chat and just see how you guys implement your matchmaking system stuff? We like to incorporate those things there, like, because you're not competitors, so I don't see why they can't share this information for the betterment of gaming in general.
Well, they don't really have an obligation to do that, but the thing is as long as you have a core idea of how to do something, a developer, or at least a competent developer, should be able to implement it through their own devices. Mechanics, like you've spoken of, can be implemented and put into games without needing to know the exact nitty-gritty details of how that was done. It's just how a developer does things.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is the best creators take from others. The best ideas, in fact, often come from taking from somebody else's idea. You
Sure.
take a part of it and you see like what was done right, what was done wrong, and then you put your own,
Spin.
pieces together. It's like taking parts from multiple different objects that somebody else created and then creating your own thing out of those different parts.
Yeah, like
Maybe,
yep.
maybe
It's not that different from even just watching each other in ESO PvP. You see somebody using a certain style of build and you get an idea and you just create your own spin on it.
exactly. You take parts and, maybe nothing original came from you, but the fact that you took different parts of different things and made something original is, in fact, a sense of originality and creativity that a lot of developers actually do employ. There is a lot of developers that take ideas from each other. You, MMOs being one of the, biggest markets of doing that.
There
Just
are so
take
many people in the MMO community that really, really love the PvP, the combat, the dynamics in the combat in ESO. ESO has some really great mechanics. The way that PvP works. I remember when New World came out and everybody was so hyped about the performance of New World. And I can't tell you how many people got into New World, even when the server and the everything was running clean. It didn't feel good. Like combat, it was fun, but was it smooth? It wasn't really that smooth. Like even when things were working well, it didn't necessarily feel reactive. It didn't feel like you could skillfully play your character. And there are moments in ESO, PvP, and PvE where like you really can control your character, block, cast, roll, dodge, animation canceling, all sorts of really great mechanics that work. And there's so many people in the MMO community that really love this system. And they have something that if they just ran with it and they made it uh, more competitive, there's so much potential here.
Yes, the game ESO really does have a lot of potential. The combat system being the center focus of this game, really. And in fact, the game was a PvP game when it first started. They advertised, they marketed trailers, all PvP. So they built the system and everything around it based on PvP, and it's an amazing system, and they've done a great job doing that. I just feel like Icy was talking about earlier, when it comes to systems and stuff, they've gotten lazier with stuff. You can see it in their expansions too. Certain content that they put into their expansions are not really reflective of what people are wanting. Yeah, pointing at certain recent stuff.
There's so many people that have come back because of the performance. That performance upgrade, whatever happened there, has been such a long overdue, exciting moment in the PvP community and the Cyrodiil community. And there's so many people who have come back. Literally, we've all seen names that have disappeared from the awesome PvP group that exists. We've been seeing them on the battlefield, like people that have been gone for so long have been coming back, one after another. It's been great, and I can only hope that people can keep that performance and enjoy it. It's exciting. I hope it keeps up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Icy, was you getting ready to say something? I noticed she's getting ready to say something before Candle interjected.
I think I was, but I kind of forgot because I'm just like enjoying listening.
I was talking about hinting towards content that they've been adding recently in expansions not really being reflective of what people actually want.
Oh yeah, I was gonna ask you for like a specific example on what you were talking about, but then I kind of pieced it
Yes.
together. It was the trading card game.
Uh, yes, there's actually two. It's the trading card game and it's also companions. The last two expansions have been terribly disappointing. In fact, some DLCs are better. Like for instance, Markarth. Markarth gave us a new arena and these, expansions. Sure, they have a trial, but I mean, I don't know. It's very lackluster. Like I don't think that there's really any reason as a PvPer. In fact, I don't think there's much reason besides a couple of potential sets to even get this new chapter at all.
I mean, I'll be honest. Since I started in September 2019, and I did the whole, for I guess the whole story on the Daggerfall Covenant side, and then once I did that, then I met up with Grim, Grim Storage Gaming,
Hmm.
and I was doing PvP ever since, and I still do active PvE, but it's not like I'm doing storyline or things like that. Just more like doing dungeons to collect gear, and that's pretty much it. So, I can't even say with all the DLC that's been made available to us over the last 2.5 years, I haven't really done it. I haven't really
I
done it,
haven't either.
and
I
I
haven't either.
I would love, and I'm looking forward to doing the story one day, but I have too much fun PvPing and just doing my own stuff
Yeah.
that I really don't. I don't want to say I don't care, but I really am just not interested right now in the new stuff. So, I've had conversations with people about this in the past where if they just didn't release any DLC for like a year straight, or I don't want to say ever, but for like a year or two, I'd be fine because PvP is self-sustaining.
Yes, it's the same way for me. In fact, the only main story I've ever played has been the base game original story. I am a very hardcore PvP player, and I have played pretty much PvP since I started. So for me, a lot of like the stuff that they release is not useful to me at all. When it comes to PvE, it's PvE to PvP.
Yeah.
Uh, there's really
I don't
no.
know what the consensus is from PvE players. Maybe you guys know, like, do PvE players get excited for these releases?
So I know some insight from PvE players coming from other PvE players that I know, and a lot of them are actually not that happy with the state of PvE either. And a lot of this has to do with that mechanics and the difficulty aren't really improving. There's
Mm.
no there's no like really good new mechanical trials and dungeons that are setting a new milestone for how to play the game and it being fun and interactive. Actually, a lot of times now, recently, there's been hard modes for certain trials that have felt unfair in their mechanics and frustrating to players from the PvE community. And it's just a oversight on Zos's part that they haven't been able to make content for those players that they actually want to do. I mean, they still want to do it, but it's not as fun as it could be. They don't do it right in some aspects. And I mean, I guess they're kind of lucky because they actually get content, whereas us PvP players, we get excited when the servers get updated and like, oh, the PvP, it works, like at least you can play now.
Yeah.
But we don't actually get anything. We haven't got any new BG maps ever since it launched in Mormont, and Cyrodiil has only received minor changes sparsely throughout the 8 years of this game's lifespan. And Imperial City received the flags and some boss changes. But yeah.
I know. So for me, for PvE, I absolutely look forward to it. But from my perspective, or not perspective, my actuality, it's more like me going to buy a book, my favorite book, but then I never read it. I just put it on the shelf, hoping that I'm going to read it one day, and I will. One day, right? Maybe like a year or two, whenever I have, free time or something like that. But that's kind of how I treat it, because I love the Elder Scrolls story. I love, following all that types of things, and, people making their videos on YouTube, like, Fudge Muppet and, people like that. But, that's the one thing I look forward to. I don't really care too much for the mechanics, because if I'm paying attention to the story, I would kind of prefer it to be easy as possible, just so I can, I beat this boss, what's the next chain of events here? Okay, I remember this guy from this quest, whatever. And I love, like, making those connections and piecing them together. For that, that's fun for me. But again, I buy the DLC, and when am I actually going to go through the storyline? I don't know. One of these days, but not today or tomorrow or next week. So, when you were mentioning the PvP stuff, Shadi, it's kind of funny because, the PvEers, they complain about, maybe things not being too hard or too easy. But PvP, right, it's self-sustaining, because I can go into a BG and I have no idea what these players are going to do. Right, it's it's going to be my reaction to whatever it is they're doing, and you could come fight me. I remember I was dueling somebody once, and we did like 2 examples, right? I had a beginner Nightblade, fighting one of my friends here, no problem. And then afterward, I said, okay, let's switch it up. So now I'm fighting my friend, and I told him that you want to be as unpredictable as possible. And what the initial guy, or the first guy, was doing was, just, fighting there, brawling it out, no problem, even though he's like on a gank build. And I said, no, dude, you got to kind of think outside the box. So as soon as, the duel starts, I cloak up, I back up, I run around, I run upstairs, and now I have like a Hawkeye view of my buddy who's just kind of, acid spraying around looking for me. But I'm on a whole nother level, literally, where this guy doesn't even see me, and then I, pop my shade down, I jump down, and then kill him, and then teleport back up. But it's just about the ease of creativity that PvP just naturally provides, because you don't know what these players are going to do. So it's always going to be engaging. It's always going to be different almost every single time. Of course, you're going to come across the same players that you see in BGs and Cyrodiil. Like, oh, okay, Malcolm likes to run around his favorite rock over in Cyrodiil and stuff like that. So, you'll learn people's, minute details, but then you kind of got to figure out how to beat them with those details. Or maybe you design a build that's going to, like, wearing shield breakers so you can fight those Sorks out there and stuff like that. So there's that issue that they complain about, it solves itself in PvP, is kind of what I was getting around to.
Yeah, that's true. That's one of the reasons why we've all been addicted to PvP for so long, probably in MMOs too, and this is why I always counter people who say that they hate Nightblades, and we have one amongst us here, a Nightblade hater.
Is that you, Kendall, or Shadi?
It's me. It's me.
Okay.
I could just go to Zos HQ, find the delete Nightblade button, and I would smack that button so fast that you have no idea.
I am of the a different mindset though. I think that it adds a very, very interesting component because you never know when you've got a Nightblade in stealth, hiding around, lurking, hunting their prey. And also, if you are a Nightblade, it's fun. It's interesting to stalk people and to be an intelligent hunter, stalking people through Cyrodiil or IC, outsmarting people, knowing what direction people are moving in. If there's a group in IC, are they moving clockwise, counterclockwise, hunting bosses? Then you can be on comms telling your friends, hey, there's a group, they're going clockwise, let's hunt them, let's track them down. And the stealth component, I think, is really important in this game and in other PvP games too. It adds a fun element.
Stealth has always been fun. I just think that I wish there was more restrictions to it because the Nightblade can pretty much just do it indefinitely.
Yeah,
And in
maybe.
order to counter it, a lot of times you have to slot things and you have to make actual sacrifices in order to fight a Nightblade. And that's my main complaint is that
Mm.
I shouldn't have to change and make my build overall weaker just in case I run into a Nightblade.
Now, I've heard also that there's going to be some interesting changes happening with Nightblade's next patch with this ring that I think we want to talk about today.
Oh, look at that segue. I didn't even have to do nothing.
Yeah.
All right.
So the Oakensoul Ring, yes, there's quite a lot of things going on with it. It's a very interesting piece of equipment because, as with most, if all mythics, they all generally have some sort of downside or gimmick tied to them where you kind of have to invest into using that mythic in some way or another. And especially in the Oakensoul, I don't think there's a mythic out there yet that is quite as demanding as the Oakensoul. It has the most restrictive mechanic to it, being that you can't bar swap. So it makes things quite interesting in how it will work.
So
Case
with
of Sithis, it was like in that same direction. I feel like they've been moving more and more towards these restrictions, or at least creating something that's very, very different, like not being able to block and now not being able to bar swap. They keep coming out with new and interesting dynamics. I'm not
Yeah,
opposed to that.
it's very creative actually to do that. I think that they did a good job making these mythics that have
Yeah,
been interesting and creative and shaking up, metas pretty much every single time they release them.
yeah.
you could
Now
throw.
sometimes they have. Go ahead, Icy.
I was gonna say, I'm still wearing my snow treaders, and yeah, I think you could throw that in that list as well. When
Yeah,
you get the immobilization and snare immunity for not being able to sprint.
yeah, you
Yep.
get a very powerful specific mechanic tied to losing another mechanic. Now, when it comes to the Oakensoul in specific, there has been a lot of interesting changes around it because they have to be careful when making these things that they don't cause, unforeseen consequences. Most notably was the initial version of the Oakensoul where it offered a lot of unique bonuses like flat weapon spell, armor, massive recoveries, massive max stats that exceeded even the mythic that gives you max stats, specifically the Death of his feet,
Hmm.
and even critical. Like it was a extremely loaded piece of equipment, and you could justify under normal circumstances that this makes a degree of sense as to why you would need all of these stats to this mythic in order to make it worthwhile to use on normal builds, because abilities are very powerful tools, and I'm going to go over this first before continuing on the mythic to kind of set the tone for it.
Hmm.
But abilities are very powerful tools. People will even use entire 5-piece sets in order to save a slot so that they
Yep.
can use another ability for more damage or more healing. Examples of this would be to use, I don't remember the exact name, but there's sets that,
You could say
give
Rattle Cage.
Rattle Cage. Yes, that's the one I was thinking of. Another one would be the monster one that gives you Major Resolve.
Judan.
Judan, yes. People use those pretty regularly, actually, to save a slot. on a skill that they maybe don't want so they can get another skill, and it's sacrificing slots for skills. So it's interesting that the Mythic actually sacrifices 5 abilities that can be considered as valuable as a 5-piece bonus. And
Not only that, it also basically sacrifices, I believe, your other bar. So another 5-piece set on a different bar, right?
no, not necessarily. You can wear a body and a 5-piece front, so you would only be sacrificing a 2-piece on the back bar.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's a specific way you would build around that to make it where you're not really losing out very much.
Because
But
as
you,
I saw it, I'd be interested to know, you guys might know more of what the community is talking about, because as far as I see it, Oakensoul might be, as moving forward for solo players, for individual players, if you're just one manning, or if you're grouping up with just whoever, if you don't have a pre-made designed and put together properly, and you're just out there with a 1vx build, or you're grouping up with whoever, your friends are online, this guy's online, that guy's online, and you're just grouping up, Oakensoul, it doesn't really give you an opportunity to set up a pre-made as carefully designed as having a back bar setup where everybody has a buff set like on their back bar. Somebody's got rallying cry, somebody's got another buff set on their back bar, powerful assault, oak Olo, the Olo set on their back bar, and everybody is using these back bar sets to give the whole team nice big buffs.
mhm.
Are
Yeah.
those teams, the power that is brought to a team by having those back bar buff sets is really quite drastic.
Yeah. So,
And so if you lose that, and all of a sudden now you're just given Oakensoul, like how does one compare to the other?
so Oakensoul, it's interesting because the initial Oakensoul, we'll call it version 1, the one that I was talking about,
Hmm.
would have actually been capable of being okay with those sacrifices just because of how much it offers. But what I was going to actually get into, and I'll come back to that thought, but the reason it actually received changes is because you have to be careful of things, specifically the werewolf. It was going to give werewolf benefits without any losses because werewolf already sacrifices its back bar for a juiced up front bar.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where the main problem came in. Now, since then, they have finally realized their mistake and they have made multiple changes. I'm not going to talk about version 2 because it's not as relevant as version 1 is, but talking about the current version of Oakensoul, we get into how it's going to work now. And I would say that the current version of Oakensoul is niche, and I know like a lot of people are probably thinking different about it, but I don't think it's as good as people think it is, actually.
What?
Yeah. So back into my argument about how an entire 5-piece bonus can be determined by a single ability, you're sacrificing 5 abilities. So
Right.
even at best, this item is really only kind of substituting some of those abilities,
So
but
as an example, those abilities, let's look at a sorcerer. So with you, when you've got an Oakensoul Ring, what are you sacrificing? You're sacrificing your armor skill. How good is your armor skill on a sorcerer?
I think a sorcerer armor skill is amazing,
Yeah,
especially
so do
if
I.
you use Hurricane, which all sorcerers should
Yep,
be using, whether you're
I
Mag or
agree.
Sam. Hurricane
Also,
is. Go ahead.
if you choose to use the spell power buff, what is the spell power buff? Crit Surge on a sorcerer. Um, do you like Crit Surge? I know for you, you haven't
I
used Crit Surge a lot, but there's a lot of sorcerers around who do love Crit Surge, especially
Yeah,
when you're using the armor skill with it, because
yeah.
you're getting lots of crits.
I think yes. So Yeah, there's a lot of things that are very good, a lot of things that people put on their back bars. I think the main problem with the Oakensoul is that it is sacrificing too much for its current state. It doesn't, it gives very powerful buffs, and I think the main uh, advantage it currently gives is the ult gen, right? That's what some
That's very
people were talking
powerful.
about, like with that uh, healer setup that Icy brought up before we started doing this is that the guy in the video, he was popping a resto ult, what, every 6 to 7 seconds, and that seems
Very
amazing.
frequently. Yeah.
That seems amazing, but the issue is that, in all honesty, what he was doing was very gimmicky and it was very extreme and
Hmm.
not very practical. It wasn't very practical at all, I don't think.
So
Um,
I guess my 2 cents real quick after all this here, I because I'm kind of piecing it all together now. With everybody saying like how overpowered, or at least the videos and stuff where people are saying
mhm.
the Oakensoul is freaking ridiculous with all the major buffs and stuff. I don't think I've ever seen anybody actually duel or fight anybody else with the ring yet on the PTS. Just like as a mock thing, just to see how good it really is. It's just freak examples that show how busted in this one particular scenario it is, where you're not PvPing or truly PvEing, right? Unless you're just going against just a bunch of NPCs that you're just practicing stuff on or testing stuff
Yeah.
on. So we haven't really seen any actual application, even in the PTS, that can kind of simulate a real world scenario.
Yeah,
Duels are a
and
good place to test it also.
they
But nobody's
initially
dueled yet. That's the thing.
they but initially people did duel with the ring. They dueled with it on specifically werewolves when it first came out in version 1,
Hmm.
and it was highly overperforming. It was god tier. It could
Yeah.
A werewolf with version 1 Oakensoul could probably defeat a high tier, high level DK in current patch.
Yeah. I believe
Just
that.
it would be no competition. The werewolf would absolutely stomp a player
There
if
have
the
been
Oakensoul.
previous patches where good werewolves were
Yeah.
scary, and that was in previous patches without a tool like this. And if they had given werewolves, which is a build that is designed for one bar, this tool that was so powerful, if they had given that to werewolves, it would have been nuts.
Yeah, it would have been too strong. But I mean, people outcried about it and it got fixed. So back to the other point that Icy was bringing up. Yeah, people don't really duel and don't really test with it anymore, and I think that has to do with it is just a niche application item now because like with that healer build that it was being showed, it's cool that you can do a resto ult every 6 to 7 seconds, but he was having to use vamp train and all this other stuff. So he only had like 2 or 3 heals on his bar. Most healers have like 5, 6, 7 heals on their bar. And he doesn't have race against time or anything. Like there was a lot of things that he was missing that would just get him killed. Like not having race against time on a healer in a competitive PvP environment will just get you killed. You'll get
Yeah.
farmed, you'll die, and you'll
Hmm.
never be
Yeah.
doing good at all. A dead healer doesn't do healing, and so
I really
uh,
don't think that, and I believe that most PvPers in the community would be, and maybe PvEers also would be very upset if the item was making double bar builds obsolete, because a lot of us don't want to play single bar builds. A lot of us don't want to play single bar builds. And the issue is that if it's just better mathematically, a lot of us will play single bar builds because we want to perform and we want to play something that is competitive, and we don't have a choice. So the real way that it needs to be released is with the intention that the design was originally intended for, which was to make single bar builds viable and to help also people who have APM issues, actions per minute issues. If you have an injury to your hand, people have carpal tunnel syndrome, or maybe you have a mouse or a keyboard that are just trash or something. I don't know, whatever your system is limiting you, that it makes a more casual experience, a fun experience, and it's viable. But if it makes double bar obsolete, there's going to be an issue. That's bad.
Well, I think skill should always triumph over
Yes.
anything else, despite what the devs think. Yeah, skill is something that should always be at the top, and using 1 bar versus using 2 bars is obviously less skillful. There's no debate there. So I think that it is correct. It should be weaker than using a double bar build in pretty much all scenarios, but that it's important that it stays viable enough to be
Yes.
usable in most content so that people, like you've mentioned, are at least able to do things. They're able to, still do trials. They're still able to PvP, and not, are they going to be like, competitive? Are they going to do hard mode trials? Are they going to be in, like BG pre-made tournaments? No, they'll probably never be able to achieve those levels of gameplay with a 1 bar build. But it's important that they can still at least do that gameplay to some degree. They can still do BGs and they can still do trials at least.
Yeah, because I know there's definitely, without a thought, 1 bar builds for PvE where you could easily hit over 100k DPS no problem. And, for those individuals like Kendall was saying that have, whatever your situation might be, this kind of gives you that shot to be able to get to that level where, get to the level of those who can bar swap essentially. But
I'm not actually sure if you can hit that number with the current ring. I thought that was version 1. And maybe version 3 does still do that level of DPS, but I do find it kind of hard to believe that it would be capable of doing that in its current version. It's been kind of watered down to a kind of major and minor buffing tool
mm-hmm.
versus unique buffs, and that's kind of like what made it strong was the unique buffs. So for example, you're in a trial, you're receiving all the unique buffs from your
Right.
healers and tank, and then on top of what the ring gave you. But now the ring kind of overlaps with a lot of that stuff, and that kind of comes into where it loses its viability in that high level group play stuff, like BGs and
Right.
trials, is because it overlaps with a lot of that stuff. Now you got the major courage. I mean, that's, you're going to find that in most BGs, you're going to find that in most trials. You don't really need it. That's just one of the examples. So I'm not sure if it can still do that, but in actuality, you don't need 100k DPS to do veteran trials. You just don't. You could do it with 60, 70, and you would be fine. And you can play PvP, decently without getting 3-4 million damage, or 3-4 million heals. Are you going to be able to do that with that ring? No, but you can still do that content.
I do believe I remember people talking about the danger and the concern of the current ring as it is, how it's going to perform with gankers. And that the major berserk and specifically the major force, on top of everything that we've got with good gankers right now, and I'm not opposed to gankers if that's what you want to play. It's a burst setup.
I'm running over to ZOS HQ right now trying to find that delete button.
There is a danger and a concern that I've heard from people that they're genuinely worried about giving this Oakensoul Ring to gankers because of that overwhelming burst damage coming out of cloak, coming out of stealth, with a 20% boost on your crit damage and Major Berserk, everything else that it's loaded with. And I think that's a pretty decent concern.
And
Yeah.
I guess you'll be able to incap like what, every like 3 times a minute?
It'll be
No,
frequent.
like it will be very frequent.
More than three
And
times per minute, you think?
yes, most definitely.
Jesus.
That might be the place where the Oakensoul Ring is the strongest in PvP.
Well, I mean, I'm sorry, Nightblade players, but a lot of the lower uh, skilled players do tend to play Nightblade, so it might help them a little bit.
Bunch of rats.
So everybody needs
Rats.
to get ready for Cyrodiil to be flooded with more Nightblades creeping around, which I don't know. I think it'll be interesting.
The rat blades rise again.
I'll be honest. I'm kind of looking forward to the Oakensoul Ring because I do like 1 bar setups. Not because I'm bad, but I just like to turn my brain off and just kind of PVE
Sure.
and peace. Leave me alone. I
Yep.
go offline and I go solo my dungeons. With my 1 bar Sork builds, no problem. So I'm kind of looking forward to it. And even for PvP healing, like I think there's a spot here because I put together a setup where I'm just running Ethereal Ascension, Shock Exoskeleton, and then the Oakensoul Ring. So I got Major Minor up at all times. Boom, got a ton of Ulgen. I got a ton of Life Givers. I can heal my team no problem. Or if you wanted a like support type build, yeah, take out Shock Exoskeleton and just throw on Transmutation. So you're still providing some sort of support for your team, and you still get to wear the ring.
Anytime somebody says transmutation, though, I would hesitate and think, why not Rallying Cry?
Well, let's see. So Rallying Cry certainly there, but because you're wearing Oakensoul, right? I would imagine you wouldn't want to use any buff sets that's gonna kind of overlap with something you got. So Olo's out, Spell Power Cure's out. Probably take out. No, Gossamer's on the list, so Gossamer's fine. PA is available, so maybe everything except Spell Power Cure and Olo in this case. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, so you can still squeeze it on there. That was kind of my point. You can still squeeze on a buff set to some degree to provide support for your team and still wear the ring.
You just gotta avoid being in the Spider-Man meme.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Reference to my video. Nice callback. Okay.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of Rallying Cry users, so
yeah, I have my set golded out. I think I used it once or twice just to get some B-roll footage for one of my videos, and then after that I just never used the set because everybody else has got it, so why do I need to use it?
Well, I think you should wear it, and then if you see someone else wear it, then swap it out because it actually is just an amazing set. It's one of the most dense sets in the game outright.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Especially for solo play. I mean, you should definitely use it in solo play.
Absolutely. Okay, so I think we're coming up on time here. Any final remarks before we do a hard closeout and I cut the video?
I mean, I guess we could just briefly go over what PvPers think or probably think about the new chapter as like an overview. And I would say that this chapter it's kind of interesting. Like the Oakensoul offers a few things. There's a few trial sets and a few craftable sets that are interesting. But I would probably say that there are a lot of PvPers that are probably just not going to buy this chapter if they're not interested in that sort of stuff. I just don't. I'm personally myself not going to be buying it. I don't see a point.
So I think if I want to get the ring, I'm gonna have to buy the chapter, right? Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, so that's something if you do intend to use the Oakensoul Ring or the Sea Serpent's Coil, or any of the other thing, or not all of them, but the Mythics in particular and the trial sets in particular, you will have to get the chapter.
Okay. All right. Kendall?
And I just hope that the server performance stays. I hope that the Cyrodiil, because that's really our best hope. If the Cyrodiil performance can stay, then people will continue to return to come back. And the more good PvPers that we can get into Cyrodiil, the more competition will go up, and the more everything just stems on that, because like there's going to be lots of good ball groups going in there, good ball groups on yellow, good ball groups on red and on blue, and they're competing against each other, and it just drives the community to be more competitive and to create more interesting setups, and it all stems on the performance. So I really hope that the performance can stay.
Absolutely. Okay, so that is the end of episode 1, and we'll catch you guys on episode 2. That's about it.
Sounds good.